I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here we are. For context, 28M, work as a junior engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Boston. We're not Silicon Valley famous, but we design smart devices and software that actually end up in real people's homes. When I first landed the job, I felt like I'd made it. This was my chance to prove myself, to turn ideas from my sketchbook into real products. I used to walk into the office with this mix of nervous energy and excitement, convinced that if I just worked hard enough, my contributions would shine. Then I met my boss. His name is Richard Bradley. On paper, he's exactly what every company wants in a manager: polished, confident, and well-connected. He's the kind of guy who can shake hands with the CEO in the morning, then charm the interns over lunch. But beneath that glossy surface, he's calculating and selfish. He knows how to take credit, spin half-truths, and make himself look like the smartest person in the room, even when all he's really done is take someone else's work. From day one, Richard made it clear how he saw me. "Bright ideas, Alex," he'd say with that fake chuckle, "but let's leave the big stuff to the adults." Every comment was dressed up like a joke, but the message was always the same: you're too young, too green, too unimportant to matter. I told myself it didn't bother me, that if I put my head down and worked, the results would speak louder than Richard's ego. But I was wrong. Fast forward to last year. I've been staying late at the office, working nights and weekends on a side project that wasn't even part of my assigned workload. It started as a what-if idea, a way to make one of our flagship devices more efficient. I'd pore over diagrams, tweak the code, run test after test, failing more often than not. But I kept at it. Some nights I left with my eyes burning, my brain fried, but my heart racing. When it finally clicked, when the prototype actually worked, I can't even describe the rush. I couldn't sleep. My mind just replayed the moment over and over. I thought I'd done something incredible, something that could really set me apart. I made the mistake of showing it to Richard first. His eyes lit up, and for a second, I thought maybe he'd finally recognize me. He smiled too wide and patted me on the shoulder. "This could be big, Alex. Let me polish it up before we show anyone else." At first, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my manager. It made sense he'd guide the process, right? I told myself to be patient. But 2 weeks later, during our monthly department meeting, Richard stood at the front of the room with my prototype on display. I'll never forget it. I was sitting next to my teammate, Jenna Morales, when he launched into his presentation. He clicked through slides describing his inspiration, his breakthrough. Word for word, he repeated the phrasing from the notes I'd emailed him. My phrasing. Jenna gave me this confused side glance like, "Isn't that your thing?" Meanwhile, the VP of product, Michael Grant, nodded along, impressed. The rest of my coworkers clapped. And me? I sat there, numb. My throat tightened. My palms were sweaty. Part of me wanted to stand up right then and there and yell the truth. But another part of me, the part that had watched Richard charm everyone in the company for years, kept whispering, "No one will believe you. You'll just look bitter. You'll ruin your career." I went home that night sick to my stomach. I tried to convince myself maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe I'd still get some recognition eventually. But then, a month later, I found out the company was filing a patent for prototype. And the listed inventor? Not me. It was Richard Bradley. That was the moment something inside me broke. This wasn't just about credit in a meeting. He was literally erasing me from my own work, attaching his name to an idea I had spent months bleeding over. If the patent went through, he'd have the legal recognition, the career boost, maybe even bonuses and promotions, while I'd be nothing more than a footnote. I can't even describe the storm of emotions I felt. Rage that made my hands shake. Helplessness that made me want to crawl into bed and never get up. Betrayal. So sharp it felt physical. But here's the thing about me. I might be quiet, but I'm not stupid. See, every late night I worked on the prototype, I made a habit of emailing myself notes, diagrams, code snippets, even little videos I recorded on my phone of the prototype running. I stored everything in my personal email, time-stamped and safe. At the time, it was just me keeping a personal record of my progress. Now, it was my lifeline, my shield, my proof. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet. But one thing was clear. Richard Bradley wasn't going to get away with stealing from me. Not this time. After the shock wore off, I realized I couldn't just sit there and let Richard walk away with my invention. But I also couldn't just march into his office and demand he fix it. Richard wasn't the type of man to admit guilt, and I had no illusions about who upper management would believe. Him, the golden manager, or me, the junior engineer. I needed a strategy, so I started small. I quietly gathered every shred of evidence I had. I dug through my personal email, organizing my notes and diagrams. I printed out timestamps, saving PDFs of every draft. I pulled the videos I'd recorded of the prototype running, complete with dates visible on my laptop clock in the corner. I even went through my work emails, digging out the messages I'd sent Richard in the beginning. I found the one where I said, "Hey, Richard, here's my new prototype concept. I've been working on this after hours. Let me know your thoughts." His reply? A smug little, "Looks promising. I'll take it from here." That one email alone was a dagger, but I knew it wasn't enough to just have evidence. I needed someone in the company I could trust, someone who might actually believe me. That's when I thought of Jenna. Jenna Morales was a fellow engineer on my team, and one of the few people who had actually noticed my late-night coding sessions. She joked more than once that I was married to the lab. After the department meeting, she'd given me that look, the one that said she knew something was off. One evening, after most people had left, I asked if she could grab a coffee with me at the cafe across the street. She looked surprised, but agreed. We sat down in a quiet corner, and I spilled everything. I showed her my notes, the videos, the emails. For a moment, she just stared at me, jaw tight. "Alex, he stole everything." Her voice was low, but full of fury. I knew something didn't add up, the way he presented it. "It sounded like you, not him." That was the first time I felt like I wasn't completely crazy. Someone else saw it too. Jenna leaned in. "You have to go to HR. This is serious." The word HR made my stomach clench. Everyone in the company knew that HR was more about protecting management than employees. But Jenna was right. I couldn't just sit on this. If Richard's patent went through, I'd lose any chance of reclaiming my idea. Still, I hesitated. If I went to HR too early, Richard might find out and bury me before I even had a chance to fight back. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying my options. Fight now and risk everything? Or wait, bide my time, and strike when the evidence would hit hardest? I chose patience. For the next few weeks, I played the loyal employee. I kept working, showing up to meetings, nodding along as Richard bragged about his invention. Inside, it ate me alive. Every smile he flashed at executives made my fists clench under the table. Every compliment he received felt like a slap to my face. But while he basked in the spotlight, I was building my case. I spoke to an old college friend, Daniel, who had gone into intellectual property law. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get a sense of where I stood. He confirmed what I feared. If the patent went through under Richard's name, it would be a nightmare to overturn. But he also gave me hope. If you can prove original authorship, timestamps, prototypes, witnesses, you've got a shot, Daniel said. But don't wait too long. Once that application is finalized, it gets much harder. That lit a fire under me. The breaking point came one Friday afternoon. Richard had scheduled a meeting with the senior leadership team, and I was asked to support him by preparing the demo equipment. I stood there, setting everything up, while he strutted in with his designer suit and slick back hair. He opened with his usual charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been leading some exciting developments in our product line." Leading. The word tasted like poison. As he clicked through the slides, something in me snapped. I realized I couldn't just let this drag on. If I didn't act, I'd lose my chance forever. That weekend, I drafted a formal complaint to HR. Not an emotional rant, but a clear, methodical document. I attached my evidence, emails, notes, diagrams, videos. I included a detailed timeline, showing how my prototype existed weeks before Richard ever mentioned it. It took everything in me to hit send on that email. My hand hovered over the mouse for nearly a full minute, my heart pounding. But when I finally clicked it, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Now it was in motion. I didn't know what would happen next. If HR would take me seriously, if Richard would retaliate, if my career was about to go up in flames. But one thing was certain. The war had begun. When I sent that complaint to HR, I expected something. Maybe an immediate summons. Maybe Richard storming into my cubicle the next morning, red-faced. But nothing happened. Days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. Richard strutted around the office like nothing had changed, still presenting my invention to anyone who'd listen. Every time I passed him in the hallway, his smug grin made my stomach twist. I started to panic. Had HR buried my complaint? Were they protecting him just like I'd feared? Then, on a Tuesday morning, I got an email from Melissa Green, our HR director. Subject, confidential meeting, intellectual property review. The pit of my stomach dropped. Melissa was known as calm but razor sharp, the kind of HR professional who spoke softly but carried a folder full of policies that could ruin you. I read the email twice, my hands trembling. She wanted me to come in on Thursday. The next 2 days crawled. I barely slept, rehearsing what I'd say, terrified I'd fumble. When Thursday came, I walked into Melissa's office, clutching a manila envelope stuffed with my evidence. Jenna had wished me luck that morning, squeezing my shoulder like she knew I was walking into a lion's den. Melissa gestured for me to sit. Her expression was unreadable, professional. Alex, I want to make it clear this meeting is confidential. What you share will be reviewed carefully. I nodded, my throat dry. Then I laid everything out. The notes, the time-stamped emails, the diagrams, the videos. I explained the nights I'd worked alone, the moment I'd shown Richard the prototype, his email reply, the way he paraded it as his own in meetings. Melissa flipped through papers, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. She asked pointed questions, dates, witnesses, context. I answered as clearly as I could, though my heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. Alex, this is serious. If what you presented is accurate, this could constitute intellectual property theft. The words hit me like a wave. Intellectual property theft. Hearing it spoken out loud, officially, gave me both fear and relief. Fear, because it meant the battle was real. Relief, because maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. Melissa said HR would open an investigation. She warned me to keep everything confidential, to act normal at work. I left her office feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The following week was torture. Richard continued his charade, oblivious to the storm brewing. My co-workers noticed my tension. Jenna, in particular, kept giving me little nods of encouragement, but no one knew the full weight of what was happening. Then it happened. I was summoned to a boardroom meeting with HR, Richard, and several senior executives, including Michael Grant, our VP of Product. My stomach dropped when I saw the invite. This was it, when I walked into the boardroom. Richard was already there, leaning back in his chair with that smug smirk plastered across his face. Melissa sat at the head of the table, a neat folder in front of her. Michael sat beside her, looking curious but cautious. "Thank you all for coming," Melissa began, her tone even. "We're here today to discuss questions regarding the intellectual property related to the efficiency prototype, currently under patent review." Richard chuckled lightly. "Questions? Melissa, I'm not sure what there is to question. I've been spearheading that development for months." I clenched my fists under the table. Melissa opened her folder. "Richard, we've received evidence that suggests otherwise." For the first time, his smirk faltered. She gestured to me. "Alex, please walk us through your documentation." My throat was dry, but I forced myself to speak. I laid out my notes, passed around copies of time-stamped emails, played one of the short prototype videos directly from my phone. My voice shook at first, but as I went on, anger gave me strength. I detailed how I'd shared the prototype with Richard, and how shortly afterward he began presenting it as his own. Michael's expression shifted from curiosity to something sharper. Anger, maybe, or disappointment. Richard laughed, though it sounded strained. This is ridiculous. He's a junior engineer. Of course he sent me drafts. He was helping me refine my concept. That's what subordinates do. I stared at him, incredulous. Helping you? Richard, those are my drafts. My videos. My diagrams. You didn't refine them. You stole them. Melissa's calm voice cut through the tension. Richard, Alex has provided extensive documentation. All timestamped before your first mention of the prototype. How do you explain that? Richard's jaw tightened. He stammered something about collaboration and team efforts, but the room was shifting against him. Michael finally spoke, his tone sharp. Richard, I sat in that meeting where you presented this as your own work. I remember the exact words. If Alex's timeline is correct, then you misrepresented his work as yours. Do you understand the severity of that? For the first time, Richard's confident facade cracked. His face flushed red. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Melissa's tone remained professional, but there was steel in it. We will be conducting a full review, but based on what I've seen, there is substantial evidence supporting Alex's claim. In the meantime, the patent application will be frozen until authorship is clarified. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, my heart hammering, realizing what just happened. For the first time, Richard wasn't in control. For the first time, the truth was out, and I wasn't invisible anymore. The boardroom showdown left the entire office buzzing. Even though HR meetings are supposed to be confidential, word travels fast in a company like ours. By the next day, whispers filled the break room. People noticed Richard looked less smug, more distracted. He spent hours behind closed doors, pacing the hallways with his phone pressed to his ear. Meanwhile, I went back to my desk, pretending like everything was normal. But inside, I was shaking, half with adrenaline, half with fear. Yes, I presented my case. Yes, the evidence was strong. But until HR finished their review, Richard still held his position, still had influence. 2 weeks later, I was called back into Melissa's office. She motioned for me to sit, her expression as unreadable as ever. Alex, thank you for your patience. After reviewing all evidence and interviewing relevant witnesses, HR has concluded the investigation. My chest tightened. Melissa folded her hands. Your documentation clearly establishes you as the original creator of the prototype. The patent application has been amended to list you as the inventor of record. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. It was like every ounce of anxiety in my body evaporated all at once. My name on the patent, not his. Melissa continued, her voice cool but firm. As for Richard Bradley, his conduct violated both company policy and professional ethics. Effective immediately, his employment has been terminated. I just sat there, stunned. Richard, fired. When I walked out of HR that day, Jenna was waiting near the elevators. One look at my face, and she knew. She grinned, pulling me into a hug. You did it, she whispered. The news broke officially the next morning. Richard Bradley, once the golden manager, was gone. The company tried to spin it as a mutual separation, but everyone knew better. And me? For the first time, I wasn't invisible. Michael Grant, the VP, called me into his office personally. He congratulated me on the patent, praised my initiative, and told me he was recommending me for a promotion to lead engineer. My hands actually shook when I signed the new offer letter. But the best moment came a few months later, when the prototype officially launched. At the product reveal event, Michael stood on stage and said, "This breakthrough comes from one of our own, Alex Carter, whose innovation is changing the way our devices perform." The applause that followed wasn't for Richard. It was for me. And yet, the victory wasn't just about the recognition or the patent, or even the promotion. It was about something deeper. Richard thought he could erase me, that because I was quiet, because I was young, he could take what was mine and claim it as his own. But he underestimated me. I learned that revenge doesn't always mean screaming or fighting. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is letting the truth speak louder than any lie. Now, when I walked through the office, People see me differently, not just as the junior engineer, but as someone who stood his ground, who refused to be erased. And Richard? Last I heard, he's been struggling to find another position. Word about his departure spread quickly in the industry, in tech. Reputations matter, and it was shattered the day the boardroom projector lit up with my name on those patent documents. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But in the end, justice was mine.